notion that global warming is a war by the mainstream media against Christianity is a concept that has gained traction in some circles. Proponents of this idea argue that the media's emphasis on climate change is a deliberate attempt to undermine Christian values and promote a secular, eco-friendly agenda. While this claim may seem far-fetched, it is essential to examine the underlying arguments and motivations behind this perspective. One of the primary concerns of those who believe that global warming is a war on Christianity is the perceived attack on the biblical concept of dominion over the earth. In Genesis 1:28, God gives humans dominion over the earth, which some interpret as a mandate to exploit natural resources for human benefit. However, environmentalists and climate activists often argue that this interpretation is misguided and that humans have a responsibility to care for the earth and its resources. This perceived conflict between biblical teachings and environmentalism is seen as an attack on Christian values and a rejection of the notion that humans have a divine right to exploit the earth. Another argument made by those who believe that global warming is a war on Christianity is that the media's focus on climate change is a means of promoting their secular, humanistic worldview. By emphasizing the role of human activity in causing climate change, the media is seen as promoting a narrative that shifts the focus away from God and towards human responsibility. This is perceived as a threat to Christian beliefs, which often emphasize the sovereignty of God and the limitations of human power. Furthermore, the media's emphasis on climate change is seen as a means of promoting a moral framework that is independent of biblical teachings, which is viewed as a challenge to Christian ethics and values. The mainstream media's coverage of climate change is also seen as biased and one-sided, with some arguing that it ignores or downplays the perspectives of Christians who are skeptical of climate change. This perceived bias is seen as evidence of a broader agenda to marginalize Christian voices and promote a secular, liberal worldview. Additionally, the media's use of emotional appeals and alarmist rhetoric to describe the consequences of climate change is seen as a means of manipulating public opinion and creating a sense of urgency that is not supported by scientific evidence. However, it is essential to note that the relationship between Christianity and environmentalism is more complex than a simple war between the media and Christianity. Many Christians are actively engaged in environmental activism and see caring for the earth as a fundamental aspect of their faith. The concept of stewardship, which emphasizes the responsibility to care for and protect the earth, is deeply rooted in Christian teachings. Moreover, many Christian denominations and organizations have issued statements and taken action to address climate change, recognizing the moral and spiritual dimensions of environmental degradation. In conclusion, while the idea that global warming is a war by the mainstream media against Christianity may seem far-fetched, it reflects a deeper anxiety among some Christians about the perceived marginalization of their values and beliefs in the public sphere. However, it is essential to recognize that the relationship between Christianity and environmentalism is complex and multifaceted, and that many Christians are actively engaged in promoting environmental stewardship and care for the earth. Rather than seeing the media's coverage of climate change as a war on Christianity, it is more productive to engage in a nuanced and respectful dialogue about the role of faith in shaping our responses to environmental challenges. By acknowledging the diversity of perspectives within Christianity and the broader public, we can work towards a more inclusive and sustainable future that reflects the values and beliefs of all individuals, regardless of their faith backgrounds.